Well, I must commend you all for getting to church on a rainy Sunday morning. You have persevered through the great long litany, and you have made it here on the Sunday where we give up an hour of sleep as well to live into the lesser known commandment, one does not live by sleep alone. Well, here on the first Sunday in Lent, just before the story that we heard, Jesus had this moment where he heard God's voice so clearly as he was baptized by John in the River Jordan. Coming up out of the waters, he heard the voice from heaven proclaim, "You are my Son, the Beloved." And again, the reading from last Sunday, where Jesus was with James and John and Peter on the Mount of Transfiguration, he hears this same voice say to him, "This is my Son, the Beloved." I want to begin this Lent with a theological statement that I invite you to wrestle with, to debate, and converse about. The theological statement is this: all of sin, all of it, is about forgetting who you are. All of sin is about forgetting who you are. And at the root of temptation, there is often a reasonable longing, an original good, and a God-given desire. All of sin is caused by forgetting who we are. If we imagine the life of faith to be merely a matter of rules and regulations, a set of moral codes that should never be broken, we would have missed the point altogether. Sin is less about ought-nots and should-nots than it is about a distortion of the good, a forgetting of who we are. And I would challenge you to think of any sin that does not have at its core a longing and a desire for something good. Now, you may have to walk that back several steps to get to that kernel of good, but at its core, all of sin is forgetting who we are. The body needs bread, right? Nothing morally wrong or shameful about a basic human need. Yes, says Jesus, but that is not all that we need. One does not live by bread alone. It takes more than just calories. Now, of course, physical hunger and bread are not evil. They are natural, normal elements of human existence. Theologian Parker Palmer notes this well in his book called The Active Life, where he writes this: ironically, this quotation that one does not live by bread alone has caused some Christians to succumb to a sin that the devil himself must applaud, the sin of spiritualizing basic human needs to the point of ignoring poverty, ignoring starvation. Such Christians have been deluded into thinking that Jesus' words justify the attempt to save the souls of the starving without feeding them, to address the spiritual needs of the poor without putting food in their mouths, and without challenging the injustice that deprives them of their fair share. But these words of Jesus, his refusal to turn stone into bread, are his response to the devil, not starving people. Jesus says one does not live by bread alone to the devil, not to someone who is starving. Another theologian, Henry Nouwen, calls this particular test to turn stone to bread the temptation to be relevant. What difference does Jesus make? Why does he matter? What does Jesus have to offer? Sacrificing the deeper need of sustenance from God for a mere snack. Sustaining his fast, Jesus is then led by the devil up to see, and in an instant, all the kingdoms of the world. It too can be yours, says this slick salesman, if only you were to worship me. Now, I think it would be safe to say, a safe assumption to say that the devil is not tempting Jesus with something Jesus doesn't desire. If we don't all desire it, is it really a temptation? Later in his ministry, Jesus will pour out a lament over Jerusalem, crying, "How often have I desired to gather your children, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings." This wonderful, tender, mothering image of Jesus. Jesus longs to gather up these kingdoms. But what the devil is distorting here, what he's trying to get Jesus to forget, is he is describing a power over instead of a power for or a power with the other. Power over is exactly the type of sin that leads to things like racism or sexism or homophobia. Power over leads to the objectification of people. It leads to economic inequality. It leads to keeping people powerless. Because power over the other is the only kind of power the devil knows. And he knows just how tempting it can be. On the other hand, power with and for is the kind of self-emptying power Jesus demonstrates in what is called kenosis, this fancy word for an intentional giving up or outpouring of your power over in order to stand in solidarity with those who have no power. This kind of giving up of power over is more than a photo op or a statement. It is more than a virtue signaling. For Jesus did not just stand in solidarity with the poor. Jesus was poor. Jesus did not merely feel bad for the sick. He touched them, talked to them, gave them hope, and acknowledged the power of their faith. There is in the incarnation of Christ the great potential for power over to be transformed into power with, into power for, to remember who we truly are. Worship the Lord and serve him only, Jesus responds to this temptation. Not power over, not prestige, not money or material goods. Worship the Lord and give no one else power over you. In the last of the desert temptations, we read that Jesus is led to the Temple Mount, where the devil takes a different approach to tempt him. If Jesus won't listen to the words of the devil, surely he'll listen to the words of Scripture. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. Here we have the devil quoting the Bible. And we must acknowledge and confess the ways that we have used Scripture more as a weapon than as a balm for healing. This is an example where the devil clearly knows the letter of the law but lacks the spirit. Again, Parker Palmer says that at some time or another, all religious people are selective fundamentalists. We all emphasize whatever portions of Holy Scripture serve our purposes at the moment, which is exactly what the devil is doing here. And we forget who we are. In this temptation, we see that the devil is the original fundamentalist. For his literal interpretation of Scripture leads not to genuine trust, but to a manipulation of the divine. Jesus, again, forgets not who he is and displays a deeper integration, a deeper understanding of the Scripture when he refuses to put God's love to the test. Time and time again in these temptation tales, the devil questions Jesus' identity. But in the scene immediately preceding the temptations, God has already spoken definitively about who Jesus is. This is my Son. This is my beloved. This is he with whom I am well pleased. Time and time again, we too find that we ourselves are deceived about our God-given identities. Either we buy into the lies that we are self-sufficiently impressive, or we succumb to the lies that we are worthless dirt. But in the creation stories of Genesis, we learn that we are not worthless dirt. We learn that we are beloved dust. This sacred worth is our birthright, as we are created in the image and likeness of God, and we, like Jesus, are marked as beloved. So more than a moral checklist or keeping the letter of the law this Lent, may we have the grace to live into our identity as beloved children of God. My friends, all of sin is about forgetting who we are. So this Lent, let us remember our identity.